Hey everybody, good morning. How about this for a change, huh? Well, welcome. My name is Brian Porter. I'll be helping coordinate the service today. I don't have any announcements, so we're all kind of getting used to getting back into the groove here. So are there any announcements that anybody has? We don't normally do it this way, but no? All right, well, we're back. My name is Brian Porter, and it is really good to be here with you this morning. So I'm going to start off with a welcome song, number 188, but I think you know the words. Oftentimes we do it in a round, but we're just going to do it right out this morning. So if you could, or if you remember the words, you don't need to open the hymnal, but it is number 188. Come, come, whoever you are. And we're asking if you are singing to put your mask on, so I'll even put mine on since I'm up front here. And Jeremy, you want to play along with it, or you want to just do it a cappella? What do you think?
Let's do it 3 times.
Okay. All right. Number 188, come, come, whoever you are. Come, come, whoever you are, wonder, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Come, come, whoever you are, wonder, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Wasn't that fun and wonderful? Okay, our opening words this morning are taken from the it's an excerpt from the prelude of the book that Tina will be talking about today, called A Hidden Wholeness: The Journey Toward an Undivided Life. It starts off with a short poem by the poet and songwriter Leonard Cohen. The blizzard of the world has crossed the threshold, and it has overturned the order of the soul. There was a time when farmers on the Great Plains, at the first sign of a blizzard, would run a rope from the back door to the barn. They all knew stories of people who had wandered off and frozen to death, having lost sight of home in a whiteout while still in their own backyard. Today, we live in a blizzard of another sort. It swirls around us as economic injustice, ecological ruin, physical and spiritual violence, and their inevitable outcome, war. It swirls within us as fear and frenzy, greed and deceit, and indifference to the suffering of others. We all know stories of people who have wandered off into the madness and been separated from their souls, losing their moral bearings and even their mortal lives. They make headlines because they take so many innocent lives down with them. The lost ones come from every walk of life: clergy and corporate executives, politicians and people on the street, celebrities and school children. Some of us fear that we, or those we love, will become lost at this moment and are trying to find the way home. Some are lost without knowing it, and some are using the blizzard as cover while cynically exploiting its chaos for private gain. So it is easy to believe the poet's claim that the blizzard of the world has overturned the order of the soul. Easy to believe that the soul, that life-giving core of human self, with its hunger for truth and justice, love and forgiveness, has lost all power to guide our lives. From here, the author goes on to say that his own life experiences say this is not so. In fact, he goes on, the soul's order can never be destroyed. It may be obscured by the whiteout, deny that its guidance is close at hand. And yet, we are still in the soul's backyard with a chance to regain our bearings. And now we will light the chalice. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Nope. We'll get used to this, trust me, we'll get back to it. Gather this hour, people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We like this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. We're going to keep it peppy here for a minute. Number 361, our opening hymn. Enter, rejoice, and come in. If you would please rise, you are willing and able. And with a little bit of gusto this morning, let's sing our opening hymn. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts to the song. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Woo! Please remain standing while we recite our affirmation of faith. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Now, please, with masks on, feel free to greet your neighbor. This morning, excuse me for a second. I had a nightmare this morning that I forgot this list and was trying to do it from memory, so thankfully I remembered it. So this morning we're going to do joys and sorrows a little bit differently. One of the reasons why is one of the suggestions is we don't pass a microphone around. So we thought, because it's been so long since we have been together, that instead of doing a normal joys and sorrows, we're going to acknowledge those members and friends of the church that we have lost over the year. Bob, if you are willing, would you pull the rope down for the bell, and after every time I say someone's name, that you just pull the rope once, and that will be our way of acknowledging it. So while I'm sure we have some joys. I'm sorry? Yeah, I know. Thank you. Well, I'm sure there are many joys that could be shared. One among them is all of us being here this morning. Not all of us, but many of us, which is wonderful. But we really want to recognize those we have lost. And I'll just say their name, and then Bob, you could pull the string, or the rope, rather. Clarence Huguini. Doris Kennedy. Tanya Nelson. Beth Porch. Joyce Erminger. Craig Weigel's mother. My brother and an uncle. Brian Barnes' brother. Sandy Waters, husband and 2 brothers. Janet French, mother. Duncan Brown's uncle. and I'm not sure who wrote this list, but it says, I lost my former co. May the memory of those friends and family members mentioned here, oh, I'm sorry, there was another one written on here. Stephanie Dowell's father, very recently. May the memory of those family members and friends and members of this church be forever held in our hearts. May the other sorrows spoken here this morning be uplifted and supported. And may our joys multiply. Thank you. Thank you, Bob. All right, we're going to sing again. Number 123. Please rise as you're willing and able. Be seated. Tina.
Good morning. I think I might have just lost my lips. You'll tell me, right? What a daunting honor this is to be the first person in the pulpit as we join back together physically and virtually. So welcome, welcome, welcome. For those of you who may not know me, I am Tina Porter. I am Brian's other half, and I have served this church in a variety of ways over the years. Currently as the very momentary chair of the search team. We'll talk about that later at the congregational meeting, but over the years in worship and religious education in many, many ways, served this church. So it is lovely to be back in this space with you all, both this physical space and that very wonderful virtual space that we created on the fly with love over the last 15 months. Somewhere toward the beginning of the pandemic, maybe when I was furiously sewing face masks, feeling somehow that this was some sort of like planting a victory garden in World War II, I'd sew those masks. I started listening to audiobooks, lots of audiobooks. I found that I could sew or knit or do laundry or work on projects in the garage and listen to books that either entertained or informed me. But then I found somewhere a little deeper into the pandemic that I was listening to books about God, about the search for the soul, about the search for truth and meaning. One of those books, Sue Monk Kidd's book, When the Heart Waits, was probably the first of that genre. She writes from her Christian perspective, basing her search on her love of God and Jesus and the contemplative works of Christian monks. It surprised me that this was exactly what I was looking for. For I have never identified as Christian. In fact, I have felt myself backpedaling from the concept of Christianity in fervor, especially recently, since someone in my life has become the car warranty people of Christ, texting me nonstop with Bible verses and questions that really weren't questions about my own soul. I wanted to answer her, I also did not. I wanted to stand on my own sense of the divine and not being bothered by, frankly, the words written by men, revised by men, reinterpreted by men, and corrupted by men. Kidd helped me greatly, helped me to see that the more I pushed away others' ideas of Christ and religiosity, I was embedding myself in a conflict that served no one well. I carried with me the fight against that got in the way of my pursuit for. I realized I needed to stop fighting with Christ or the perception thrust on me by others in order to open myself up to the possibility of God and the hope for the interior life I so desperately craved. Further, we were in the middle of a pandemic, and in the midst of that pandemic, things about America that we all knew became impossible to ignore. That razor-thin margin a majority of Americans dance between financial survival and complete ruin. How the quality of health care depends on zip codes or school districts and the majority makeup of said neighborhoods. And of course, we all, with nowhere else to go, sat and watched on our television screens the lynching of George Floyd that created a solidarity and horror we good white liberal folk could no longer set aside as someone else's business. Of course, I was seeking God in these moments because nothing made sense anymore. And from my place in society, I didn't have to watch the death close up like our healthcare workers did. I didn't have to go out and make a living, and we were comfortable while Brian maintained his position and worked from home via computer and phone. I found myself feeling like a voyeur at the pandemic, with no real help to offer other than keeping from spreading the illness. Zoom Church helped, but while it offered some form of connectedness to a greater society, it didn't seem to be refilling my spirit in a way that helped me find greater meaning. Enter the algorithm-based life in our digitally connected world. When I looked for something to listen to on the plane to visit my mother and sister last week, and based on those God-searching books I'd been listening to, Audible, the audiobook service I subscribe to, suggested Parker J. Palmer's A Hidden Wholeness. Many of you will be aware of the work of Parker Palmer. He is an educator, activist, and writer who has been creating works on healing the world for more than 40 years. As I began listening to A Hidden Wholeness, I felt my body shift tangibly. You know what they say, when the student is ready, the teacher arrives. I'm still processing this book, but Palmer talks about the original self, or soul, as the person we were born to be before the world imprinted its needs, wants, and demands upon us. The world teaches us to hide this interior life away, keep it private, maybe even keep it buried so deep we don't remember the original soul at all. He tells of his own bout with clinical depression that eventually helped him to uncover the root, the life divided by the yearnings of the soul and the demands of the world that often drown out what we need to hear from our own selves. One of the concepts, this is where I need you, Patricia. Just wake her up a little bit.
No, I have to put shoes on.
Not really. Oh my gosh, you come to church and you have to put shoes on. So one of the concepts Palmer uses to describe the interplay of the soul and the exterior self, the self we show to the world, is the Mobius strip. If you're not familiar with the Mobius strip, you are not alone. I didn't know. It is a mathematical concept of a one-sided three-dimensional object. If you take a piece of paper, give it an odd number of twists, and then tape it together, as Patty has just done, or hold it together, you get this shape that appears to be many-sided. But if you take a pencil and draw a line down the center of the strip, the end of the line will meet the beginning of the line, which makes it all one side. I know. What witchery is this? I don't know. You're done. Thank you so much. Let's all give. There will not be a test after the service. So using the Mobius strip, Palmer helps us to understand that our interior and exterior lives are not separate when we are living a life of wholeness, of integrity. But the two lives are reflective of each other and are also constantly co-creating each other. When we are consciously living and making sense of the way the exterior world affects our understanding of our interior self, as well as how our interior self is impacting the world outside us, we are living into a wholeness. So in other words, on a personal level, when we are aware that the expectations of our career life, boy, there's a lot of weird sounds in this sermon. When we are aware that the expectations of our career life are impacting our ability to live in integrity with our interior values, on the Mobius strip of wholeness, we can consciously make changes so that our professional life aligns with those values. At the same time, understanding we are feeling conflicted by our work environment can help our soul or interior self speak up for the changes outside ourselves that need to be made toward that alignment. Not saying that it actually happens, but when you're in alignment with your soul, you're in balance constantly with trying to change what's around you to match your actions with what you value. And like most things, this is not a one and done, I fixed it, let's move on mentality, but a continuous ride. Let me explain it this way, as I've just come home, just like 12 hours ago, just come home from a road trip. Let's consider using the GPS we use to get around in the wider world as another metaphor for this. When you make a turn that the GPS didn't want you to take, it yells at you to turn around, make a U-turn until, after a while, it realizes you're not going to change and recalibrates itself, and then tells you to follow another route until it realizes that you really did want to stop at that winery, and for a bit, you and the GPS are back to peaceful realignment. Until the next time you make a weird turn to avoid traffic or visit a fruit stand or whatever. These are very random examples. Living in integrity on the Mobius strip is a series of constant recalibrations where the world imposes on us and we consciously co-create with it the life of intention. Though this book was published in 2009, A Hidden Wholeness felt like it could have been written specifically for this moment. And when I say this moment, I don't necessarily mean this moment in general. I mean this moment when we attempt to return to church physically and continue a virtual presence to continue a virtual presence to support those who don't yet feel comfortable coming into the space, or more joyfully, those who have found us during the pandemic but do not live locally. One of the phrases I hope we never use again is "welcome to the new normal." I also bristle at the idea of getting back to normal. As I sat on the plane listening to this book, I came to understand my antagonism to both phrases in a new way, from my soul's perspective. You see, while I say the pandemic was not hard on me, it is because the opening of time and space allowed me an opportunity I rarely take, to look deep and inward and to consider my yearning to embrace the soul I have been so good at evading for so long. The books I've been listening to and the silence I've learned to embrace while doing macrame or painting projects or cleaning out a bedroom provided the opening to notice, recognize, and acknowledge the work of God on my soul. I offered my mind time to wander so that it was busy over here doing something while my soul whispered and sometimes hollered within my heart. And when I heard it clearly, when I heard it at all, it was helping me remember what is important to me, what is important to the world, how to marry these purposes in a way to move forward with integrity. Not that I always do, but I have the lesson I was missing, and sometimes maybe even on purpose. And this is where my agitation with all forms of the word normal started to be revealed. My disgust with the idea of losing so many souls to this pandemic, as well as to the pandemics of racism and poverty, and even of the notion of what normal is. Normal, I've come to realize, is a myth we cling to as we navigate the changes of our lives, both personal and communal. In devastating times, we want to look back and point to a time when things worked. Remember back then when things worked? But we always come back to the reality that normal has never worked for everybody. It has not worked for gay, transgender, or non-binary people. It has not worked for Black or Indigenous people in the Americas for at least 400 years. Normal has never worked for people whose bodies or brains do not work in the same way as what we consider to be normal. The hidden wholeness also pointed me to the internal agitation I was having about our congregation's decision to come back to church physically at this time. Palmer talks about the divide itself and the search to come into integrity, to wholeness, but not in the way that is static. When we talk about faith, about space, about time, as if they are static beings, as if there is a normal that we can all recognize, we miss the reality that is right in front of us. Or as Jerry Ashmore, our resident Zen master, would say, we take the finger pointing to the moon for the moon. My personal agitation about coming back here was not about will we wear masks, will we sing, will we hug, though all of that was a part of it. My personal agitation was about will we all come back as if to a world that has not changed in significant or moral way. Will we come back and get back to the business of making sure this building survives, our worship space survives, our buildings and grounds are tended to, and miss the lessons the pandemic forced on us? Specifically, will we miss the opportunity to know that our congregation is not this building, this space, even this specific group of people, but that it is an ever-changing dance of the interior self we are and the exterior public-facing image shown mostly online during the last 15 months? Will we miss the opportunity to take stock in reconnecting in person the profound truths we learned when we weren't seeking anything but connection as the world shut down? We became connected to new ways of worship through the worship team's invitation to ministers from around the country and territories, as we had one minister from the U.S. Virgin Islands. These ministers, not knowing much about us but our commitment to Unitarian Universalism, brought us into deep reflection on our purpose as individuals and of our duty as a part of a faith tradition with a moral duty to fight for justice for those whose voices are often ignored, drowned out, and denigrated. Do you remember how we did this for ourselves too, dedicating our Black Lives Matter banner while being heckled by a band of hometown gun-toting racists who yelled at one of our own to go back to your country? As Brian read earlier from the beginning of A Hidden Wholeness, Parker Palmer introduces the purposes of the book as a lifeline to the soul, much like the lifelines used by farmers in the Midwest. That dedication ceremony was a lifeline for my soul, reminding me of the big work we as a group have ahead of us, and I, as an individual, have to tackle outside my preferred little bubble. Our raising that banner was not the end of the work, for sure, but it is the rope that reminds us where we need to go. As we gather together today, I hope we will welcome each other forward rather than back. Whether physical hugs or air hugs or elbow bumps are the greeting of the day, please remember to welcome everyone, to touch the rope, to remember our way back to each other, but also to welcome them forward to connect our common soul to our common work. We'll be meeting after this worship service to talk nuts and bolts of plans for the congregation, voting on budgets and making motions. Before we do so, though, as we think of those members and friends we have lost, of the time we have lost together, let us remind ourselves of who we are individually and together. What is it we do here that helps us connect our outward life to our souls? What is it that we do individually and collectively that helps us toward wholeness, that helps us not just remember, but remember, come back again to go forward together? And all of this is what we are doing again together now. We are recalibrating how we will be together in the same space while still under pandemic conditions, but also with the things we experienced and learned about ourselves and our world during our imposed time away. We are recalibrating how we will go forward with the search for a minister and continuing our worship without professional religious leadership due, in part, to recalibrations made by the many ministers who thought they wanted to search for a new congregation this year and then changed their mind, deciding it was more important to help their current congregations navigate the transitions of this coming year. Each of us have weathered disappointments this year, lost jobs or job opportunities, lost vacations, lost connections with loved ones giving birth or getting married or suffering illness, and of course, those who died this year with whom we could not spend time saying goodbye. We as a congregation have weathered these disappointments too, and even as we rejoice in coming together again in this space and virtually, we will continue to weather disappointments as a body and as individuals, such as our disappointment in not finding the minister of our dreams during this last search process. How we come together in these times, whether virtually or in person, can be considered through this Mobius strip mentality. Are we in line with our guiding principles as we move forward? Are there outside forces driving decisions that are not in line with our shared values? Are we in this as a body of individuals being supported to know our own soul path so that we may support the work of the larger body and pursue our work in the outside world? I think we are. But I also think we need to help each other not get lost in the details of the business of the church, that we forget to listen individually and as a body for what can be referred to as the soul, or as the Buddhists say, original nature or big self, or what Thomas Merton calls the true self, and what humanists call identity and integrity. What is our reason for being? What is our great calling? What is the thing that we give back to the universe or to each other that is in line with our internal values? A few years back, Brian and I got to briefly meet Reverend Dr. Cornel West, who was keynote speaker for Valparaiso University's MLK Day convocation. As we parted, he said to me, looking me straight in the eye, "Go and share your big heart with the world." It still makes me tear up a little as I think of that moment. The words resonate differently for me today, like, aren't they an excellent mission statement? Go and share your big heart with the world, not just for me, but for each of us, for this congregation. What are we clinging to when we keep our hearts to ourselves? What is the world missing? And what, my friends, are we missing? One last quick story. While I was traveling with my mother and my sister, my mother had this dream that perplexed her and was vivid and short enough that she was able to remember it. I love her. My mother, all 5'2" and 98 pounds of her, had a dream that she was, let me put it this way, I was with a large black woman who appeared to be my good friend, and she told me to stop taking up so much room. I don't think I take up so much space, she told my sister when I wasn't in the room. My sister said to her, but your opinions do. My sister then had my mother tell me the dream, and my sister responded to my mom, maybe you should listen to this woman. Maybe, I said with a smirk, it was God talking to you. And God, my mother said, is a large black woman. My mother is the heart and soul of our family, and she is also the brain, and whatever she knows, she feels compelled to share. The last year has been hard for her, having to settle into her senior living space with enough time to create the social life she was searching for when she chose to move there, and then the curtain fell. Responsibly, yes, she's still alive, and I'm grateful for that, as is she, but she felt completely cut off, as did many of her new friends. Lord knows she's had a lot of time talking to people, but what I heard in that dream was someone letting my mother know, you have been heard. You can pass the microphone to someone else for a bit. I include myself when I say the following. There are many of us in this congregation who take the opportunity to take the microphone and forget to allow space for others. I'm sure there are many here who wish to be heard more but aren't quite sure how. One final invitation to all of us is to make space for the silence both within ourselves and between each other. It is something of a revolutionary stance to prioritize your true self and the truth selves of others, and not to the flow of pressures of the outside world to be a big presence, whether in the ideas or opinions or lifestyles. It is truly revolutionary, especially in pre-pandemic America, to not look outward for approval or acceptance or admiration, but to move quietly and intentionally to the calling of the soul. That includes the soul of this church, the soul of Unitarian Universalism, and even, to coin a phrase, the soul of America. But we cannot do as I do when I've given my druthers, which is to live only in my interior world. The soul yearns deeply for connection, for purpose, for wholeness, and it takes both the interaction within ourselves and between us all to co-create a world more just, more lovely, more patient, and more kind. I'm glad to say I have at least begun an honest relationship with my soul, even though I keep bumping against what I say I want and what I actually do. We as a church have been in and out of these conversations for decades. What is our purpose and who do we serve? The conversation itself is a Mobius strip, but as long as we recognize the pressures that exist between the two sides that are really one side, we can recalibrate ourselves to our shared mission. We will shift where we need to, but continue to be convened by love, which is, after all, the rope that leads us home. Welcome home, my friends, and welcome forward. And now I invite you to sing with verve, number 1028, Fire of Commitment. Is it me, or did those words get smaller over the pandemic? Whew. And also, if we're going to continue to be masked and singing, shorter hymns, please. I do agree with you. Our closing words come from the back of the gray hymnal, ascribed to Chung Young. Oh, how great is the divine moral law in humanity. Vast and illimitable, it gives birth and life to all created things. It towers high up to the very heavens. How wonderful and great it is. All the institutions of human society and civilization, laws, customs, and usages.
I love technology. Valerie just sent me a text, says, hey, where's the offering? So, because of COVID, we're not going to pass, so I will just leave loose change for social change, can up here, and then also a basket. She's going to post on the chat, I guess, the link, and do we have that for here for anybody? James?
I can create a QR code.
Okay, great. So you can do it traditional, the old way, or we can move forward with the new way and go from there. I'll just set it here. We are not going to extinguish the chalice until after the annual meeting, which will start at, where are we at here? Should we say 10 after? Tracy?
I believe it's posted as 15 after.
Should we stick with that?
Yeah, let's stick with it.
Okay, so 12:15, because of those who are virtual, we'll take a little bit of a break here, coffee hour. You can use the restrooms, and we'll come back in for the.
Can we extinguish the chalice and then get lighted?
Yes. Then extinguish the chalice.
Say, oh, I thought we were going to just leave it going, but I'm flexible. Sure, we can do that. Okay. I'm sorry. Please join with me as we extinguish the chalice. Extinguish this flame.
Like the night of light, true